days after the removal of the fuel subsidy in Nigeria, where are we at the moment? You are welcome to the Patriot podcast. My name is Dell, and to look at these issues and much more, I have amazing guests that we'll be discussing on this matter. We have Dr. Henry Dumbiri, who is a solar expert all the way from Scotland. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And we also have our own Uchenna Simon, a.k.a. Prince Yusi Ingawa. We're glad to have you today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, looking at it from a Nigerian who is based in another country, let's start from there. What is your perception of Nigeria? Looking at from the 29th of May, 2023, that is, what's your perception?
Well, I think the subsidy announcement has obviously kind of taken the shine off the new administration a little bit. That's to be expected because when you look at Nigeria and Nigerians as a whole, subsidy seems to be the only thing that the citizens tend to benefit from the government, since subsidy began maybe nearly 30, 40 years ago. So I think on the whole, at some point, if we really want to move forward as a country, subsidy had to go. I think the key issue is the timing and the sort of unprepared nature of the government in terms of how the announcement was done, and essentially the lack of management in terms of information dissemination, in terms of carrying the citizens along. Yeah.
Okay, so do you think that now that it is already here, the fuel subsidy is already here, would you say that it should be reconsidered, looking at the results of what's happening to it?
No, I think there's always going to be some pain, in the removal of subsidy when subsidy is removed. I mean, if you look at Kenya, which probably was the most recent country in Africa that removed subsidy at the start of a new administration there as well. So, but there are ways that and there are ways and things that the government can do to try and cushion the hardship and the financial impact on the citizens, because it is important to look at it from the angle that this will drive inflation. Every Nigerian staple, every other thing, every goods and services, the cost of doing business will ultimately go up. But it's one thing to remove subsidy, but it's also very important for the citizenry to be carried along and for the government to actually do more and reduce the cost of governance as well, because that is the way to carry people along. People in the lower spectrum of the ladder, socio-economic ladder, should be able to see that there's a bit of pain and sacrifice, from those in government as well. So that's one way, for Nigerians to see that they are part and parcel of the solution, not just the problem.
Now, Prince, part of the effects that we are seeing now is the cost of living, which has totally changed. Even those that have not gone to the market lately, price of things have changed. So it looks like there's a whole lot of effect on Nigerians. What do you see out there?
Well, the thing is that, just like Dr. Henry said earlier, for me, I think previously when I was here, I said it that there is no time to do the right thing. There is no wrong time when you are doing the right thing. And Nigeria is a country where if you don't take the rough path, you would definitely fail. The moment you appear to take a path where they should praise you, they should tell you are doing the right thing, then you are failing. The moment you start hearing people praising you, then you are beginning to fail. The best thing is, a good leader will always choose what is best for his people.
That's right.
A good leader does that. And can I tell you something? Yes, we are in democracy, but believe me, there is something that knows what is best for me than myself.
possibly. Now, looking at the NLC, few days ago, coming out to threaten a national strike, and at a point, they were refusing to honor the invitation by the federal government for a meeting. But then, maybe I would call it good news. Now they have decided to, just shelve in the issue of the strike. Do you think it's for the good of Nigerians that they have decided to hold on with the strike? Because in the first place, it was supposed to be for the good of Nigeria when they said they were going on the strike. So what do you think of their decision to call off the strike now?
Well, NLC decision to call off the strike means that a capable hand is on the throne. Okay? A Democrat is on the throne. Because one thing with democracy is all about negotiation. We sit at the table, we discuss, we agree. That is the essence of democracy. And I think this administration has actually taken one step forward towards that. And believe me, I'm impressed, because I know a lot of the previous administrations that might neglect this threat coming from NLC. But this present administration did not. They called them, they sit with them, they negotiated. And that's the right way to go. You don't look down on people's agitations, people's opinion towards a particular policy. The only thing is, if this policy, you are truly convinced that this policy is for the betterment of our country, for the betterment of Nigerians, the best thing is to sit people down, explain to them why this is necessary, this is important, and it should be, it should take effect.
Part of what has always been a doctor, with the NLC, at some point, even concerning this particular story, a few days ago, some of the dailies picked the story where some NLC officials are saying that there is a particular faction that is siding the federal government, and there are other factions that, are with the people. Do you think that will bring out the end result to favor Nigerians?
I think, first of all, it is really important to state that and this is where, the government of today, deserves some credit, because they are sounding a more conciliatory tone, which is good compared to previous administration. Another thing to point out, in fact, as well, is that the federal government actually pulled a bit of a masterstroke, because they went to the industrial court whilst they were doing the supposed negotiation, and the court forbade the NLC from proceeding on the strike in the first place. So, with or without, the outcome of the understanding that was reached with the federal government, the strike certainly would not have hold. It would have been illegal to go on the strike tomorrow. Yeah. So, having said that, though, and without wanting to, it'll be difficult to sort of remove the political connotations out of this, because the NLC is a major part of one of the opposition parties that campaigned, to remove subsidy. So I'm a little bit confused as to why, they initially took a militant position to proceed on strike, because if I'm correct, the other presidential candidates equally campaigned to remove subsidy. So it doesn't make any sense at this point for the NSO to have a divided approach or a divided faction with regards to this particular government policy. With or without that, it is obviously important that the NSO is standing up for workers, because everyone is impacted by the removal of subsidy. But I do think that proceeding to announce a strike before any sort of meaningful conversation or intervention by the federal government was a bit premature.
Oh, well, but then the issue is, for those that didn't agree to the meeting with the federal government, they just felt it was the supporters, in quote, the NLC members who are in support of the government, that would have attended the meeting, and they would have spoken for their own good, not the good of Nigeria. What do you make out of that?
Well, you see, at times some people come up with this idea of notice me, at least, want to create some sense of relevance, all right? Because the budget, the 2023 budget, does not have subsidy effect in it. There is no subsidy. That's why I said this present administration are not the ones that remove the subsidy. Already the 2023 budget doesn't have it.
Yes.
So all the present administration did was to complement what the previous administration did.
Yeah.
So the issue here is that why will it be on May 29 instead of June? Because the budget carries that the subsidy will be removed June. The effect, it will take effect from June. Okay? Your rent don't expire January. January you go. Do you get that aspect?
Yes.
So why must you tell me it must be 30th January when I will leave? No. Your rent expires January, you're leaving January.
But if
it's as simple
legally,
as that.
If it's legal, I don't know, I'm not a legal practitioner.
Yes.
But then if it carries a particular date, wouldn't it have been best to effect it from the said date based on documents, based on the Constitution, what is written?
But you see, this
If a doctor tells you that as a pregnant woman, your due date is on Thursday, it doesn't matter if it's 11 p.m. Thursday is Thursday. So NLC just want, I don't know how to put it. In this aspect, I'm not with them.
So
all right?
It's a 2 days problem,
yes,
2 days that is
yes,
the problem.
I'm not with them on this.
Okay.
You are just trying to create unnecessary chaos in the society. All right?
The subsidy provision, because the budget officially expires on the 30th of June.
Exactly.
So so there is still subsidy, as it were, for the month of June. I think what President Tinubu was saying is that the 2023 appropriation bill does not officially become operational, so to speak, until the 1st of July.
Yeah.
So so there will still be provision for subsidy for the month of June. But I think the key issue here is communication. It is alleged that President Tinubu went off script, in his inaugural address, that subsidy was not mentioned in the written speech. But my key issue is the lack of communication from core government agencies like the Ministry of Information, like the National Orientation Agency. Millions of Nigerians don't even know the meaning of the word subsidy. What subsidy means to them is affordable PMS. So the NOA should be doing more to sensitize Nigerians on why the government has taken this decision and how it is supposed to benefit every Nigerian. Because without that, you will not carry Nigerians along. It is important to constantly put out communication out there to sensitize Nigerians to say, this is the reason why we had to do this. And yes, there will be pain, but this is what we're going to do to ensure that we look after the most vulnerable in society. That's what they should do. And if they do that consistently, and I'm sure, Nigerians will see that when you compare to other countries who have taken this step, for example, in Kenya, the price of petrol in Kenya equally went up, but they didn't have any sort of social meltdown or social unrest because of that, because it was well managed, in terms of communications with the citizens. So that's what we need to replicate here.
Now, part of what the NLC was demanding for was the reversal of the pump price before any decisions are taken. But at this point, is it a no going back? The way you see things, is it no going back position?
It's not. It's a no going back thing, and I support that policy actually. Okay, Nigeria subsidized the crude, or rather PMS product, what we don't understand is that federal government are not subsidizing this product for Nigerians. Let me tell you what is happening. Federal government subsidize this product for Africans, for African countries. We are giving subsidy to African countries. But the issue is that even the subsidy doesn't get to the African countries because there are people that pocket the money. Do you
Yes,
understand?
yes.
You brought in products, crude products in the country, and there is a subsidy that has been paid for that product that you have imported. And do you know what they do next? They move the product to either Chad, Niger, or Cameroon. Do you get the point?
Exactly.
So it appears that we are subsidizing the product for African countries,
Now, you know,
not for Nigeria
Part
alone.
of the concern is nobody's been held responsible for this issue. We all know it's illegal, but nobody is talking about the consequences of diversion of the PMS to other countries. Who is doing it? And nobody's been held culpable, but then we're trying to find a solution to it. So how certain are we that they will not find another way, to still put pressure on the nation's account?
The best way to kill a snake.
The vice president,
Yes.
the vice president Kashim Shettima, said something. He said that Nigerians should support the president on this subsidy removal. That this particular subsidy cabals will fight back. They will attack.
They will, definitely.
But they will not win.
If Nigerians...
No,
support-
Nigerians have supported already. Did you see anybody raising his voice anymore? Nobody is raising his voice. Filling stations are empty.
Yeah.
Do you
They're probably
understand?
empty because a lot of people can't afford,
Can't afford.
to
That's
buy.
another
No,
thing.
it's not that a lot of people cannot afford. That is the idea. Now that even the filling stations realize that there are no customers, competition will creep in. If you are selling 540, I will sell 520 so that I will get customers. This is how it will keep playing.
Do you think that will work to bringing down the price of the PMS with time?
Definitely, definitely.
Doc, you wanted to say
Yes,
something?
the best way to kill a snake is to go for the head.
Yes.
So if you take out what creates the need for smuggling because it's cheaper here, then you remove subsidy. So that's what has been done. But I do think as well that if we want to get to a point, because Nigerians don't ask for much from the government, we don't.
Yeah.
But when you realistically consider how much trillions is budgeted for subsidy, it is a misnomer. It doesn't make any sense. That's money that puts a lot of pressure on our foreign exchange earnings, and it just causes so much. You put so much pressure on the local currency because everybody, although under the subsidiary regime, NNPCL,
Yes.
was the sole importer of PMS. But with this, anybody who is licensed will now be able to import PMS. And of course, what that does, it triggers competition. So if an individual has missed the relevant requirements, decides to go into PMS importation, then that would ultimately drive prices down. Because the more players you have in that downstream sector, the more competition you will have.
Definitely.
And, the expectation is that, the supply side of economics will play here. When you oversaturate the market with the product, then the price should automatically drop.
Yeah.
So that's the expectation.
And in such scenario, nobody will take the hit. The government will not take the
Since
hit.
they're not paying for it.
Exactly. The government will not take the hit, and certainly the citizens will not take the hit.
My little concern about allowing multiple players to play in that space is I'm not sure which agency of government will be responsible for this or are responsible for it to ensure that the quality or scrupulous people don't come into the space and begin to import substandard PMS, into the country. So that quality control check needs to be top notch. It needs to be spot on to make sure that only the right quality of PMS is brought. I think there were a couple of years ago we had substandard PMS imported into the country. So we definitely do not want a repeat of that. As the NNPC L will not be responsible solely for importing petroleum products into
I think this is a very vital point, and thank you for bringing that up. Now, we have the Trade Union Congress demanding for a salary increase for Nigerians. That way it could cushion some of these challenges with the removal of the subsidy. Does it make sense?
It does, absolutely. And I think they are demanding for 200,000 from 30,000. It's like I said, this is a government that believes in negotiation. They will sit, deliberate, and come up with a lasting solution to minimum wage, actually. But like I said, even the federal government definitely knows that removing the subsidy comes with incentives. And the incentives is that you have to, bring up people's livelihood to some extent, and that has to do with the minimum wage.
That's right.
If you have a minimum wage of 30,000 naira, the money is even gone on transportation. Not to talk of you feeding, not to talk of other things that you need
House
to do for
rent,
yourself and all. Nobody will survive with that. A federal government civil servants, they cannot survive with such minimum wage. All right? And I believe they will look into it. I believe the federal government will look into this, sit with them, deliberate, and come up with a lasting solution.
Part of what some Nigerians are saying is the issue of sustainability. If eventually 200,000 is being approved as the minimum wage, sustainability of paying that amount of money.
I cannot see, except the proverbial miracle happens that the nation's finances revenue increases dramatically, that even the federal government will be able to afford 200,000 naira minimum wage.
Yeah, like I said.
But I do think that it is important that the minimum wage is reviewed upwards. But history does tell me that that process takes a while. It's an act of parliament. We don't have a constituted 10th Senate or 10th National Assembly yet, so it is not going to be an immediate change. Another thing to point out as well is when you consider the last time, I can't remember the exact year that the minimum wage was increased to 30K. Most states in Nigeria can't afford to pay, or have not been able to pay, 30K minimum wage. And then you talk about how many states many states are not financially viable. If you want to look at states as a business, most of those states are absolutely financially bankrupt. So you cannot add more overheads, to a state that's struggling, and expect the state to continue to survive. Or something has to give. It's either there will be, a complete abandonment of providing infrastructural development in the states, and then the state government just focuses purely on paying salaries, which is not what people voted for. I mean, sometimes I hear governors saying, I don't owe salaries. That is the minimum thing that you should do, so it is not an achievement that you've paid workers' salary, so when I hear people say that, it just makes me laugh, because someone's worked, you should pay them, so I feel that, the many states, excluding maybe Lagos, Rivers, and maybe Delta, will be able to afford, that level of minimum wage. But I do think that there are other areas where the federal government can come in and support workers. For example, creating, investing more in public transportation. You can subsidize transportation. Most developed countries still subsidize, transportation. For example, in the UK, you have under 60s have free bus pass. So many things that the government can do. But I do think that President Tinubu has done the right thing, and he should just stick with it. He's exerted his authority. Some people felt it was a bit dictatorial and authoritarian, but I don't think so. He's just basically stated what was in the budget. I think the key issue was the timing, and the fact that not enough has been done with regards to carrying people along.
Well, and then it looks like the monies that would have been spent on the subsidy removal, I am seeing it as if that's possibly why the NLC thinks that the federal government could use those monies that were used for subsidy to now, use it as salaries.
But that requires borrowing. That requires more borrowing.
Well, because we have debts already.
We don't have the debt to revenue ratio is too high. You can't keep.
Yes.
If you run a business, you can't keep borrowing. So what should be happening is trying to prune expenditure, cut the cost of governance. The cost of governance in this country is too high. Consider merging some government ministries and
agencies,
departments.
yeah.
And the cost of doing government business, as it were, is too high. If we begin to, for example, I don't think it would be out of place to ask the ministers, to ask the members of the National Assembly to take a pay cut, for example. That could be a starting point, because it is a bloated overhead expenditure. The overhead expenditure is just too much.
Just like Kwara State.
Yeah.
Kwara State they have reduced their working days into 3 days.
Yeah.
So things like that, all right. But Katsina State, the governor in Katsina State now, they have embarked on a project of getting, enough buses for students and even other communities around the metropolis for an easy means of transportation. And probably, I'm sure they will subsidize the prices, But I don't think NLC are actually insisting on it must be on 200,000.
I mean, I think they've given a figure and a band to work with. They've given
the federal government will look into it. They should look into it as well. So I know they will actually come. Maybe they will agree in the middle.
I mean, you just talked about Kwara State government announcing a 3-day working week. I really don't see what benefit that will be, because we operate, many state governments operate probably one of the most inefficient civil service structures that I know of, because even whilst they were doing a 5-day working week, the efficiency within the civil service is pretty low. Productivity is low, and then you now ask them to work 3 days a week. It just makes government business even more slower. There'll be more red tape. There'll be more difficulties, for members of the public who want to access government services. So I really don't see the import of that. I'm purely looking at it from a productivity and and government, in terms of how government interacts with people. I don't see the benefit of
you go to a whole lot of secretariats and
they're out of the office on a Friday.
Fridays are free days, unofficial.
But I feel the Kwara State government, I don't think they are making that permanent. I think it's just a measure to just reduce the pressure, the tension on people towards the subsidy removal. But I think they should have other They should have their own plans as well.
Because on those days when civil servants are not at work, there would be no access to government services.
Yeah.
For example, you want to make a payment, for something, there's no one there. So it does impact on revenue generation as well. So these are some of the things that needs to be looked at, and not just announce a populist make a populist announcement, in good faith, but with attendant consequences.
That's right.
So it's important to look at what the ripple effects or cumulative effects will be in announcing a policy like that. It doesn't make financial sense to do that, in my opinion.
So we have, with the review now, the NLC have agreed to have meetings with the federal government, and what they are asking for now are considerations by the federal government on education, roads, and other things listed, almost like 12 or 10 lists of demands made there. Now, some of the things they're asking for are things that naturally every government should consider. When the NLC is asking for a consideration on education, for example, isn't that what the federal government is meant to do? Like, why do you think the NLC is narrowing it down in every bit as if it's a separate request or demand by them and not what the government is naturally supposed to do?
When you consider that subsidy, the total budgetary provisions for health and education is less than what has been budgeted for subsidy alone. That tells you everything you need to know. How can a society grow with that sort of lopsided thinking? So we should invest more in education, in health, and infrastructure.
Yeah.
When you have those three things, those three sectors drives every other sector. So it's an absolute no-brainer that the government has taken this decision. And in my opinion, I think what's ironical is that in 2012, when President Jonathan first mooted the idea of it, there was uproar up and down the country. I think there was Occupy Nigeria back then. But in fact, that was actually the best time to have done it, because we didn't have so much of a revenue problem at the time compared to what we do now. So the key issue is, and what's driven this decision is, we have a revenue problem. We're spending 96 naira in every 100 naira that we earn to service debts. That's too much. Even in your personal, in our individual daily lives, if you spend 96 naira every day out of your 100 naira, you will go bankrupt. So it doesn't make economic sense or financial sense to continuously live on borrowing to pay salaries, borrowing to you don't borrow for consumption, you borrow for investment. That's pure simple economics. You borrow for capital projects, for capital investment, because that's where the derivatives come from, not from. You don't borrow to pay salaries. Nobody does
but
that.
I believe the present government, at least the president, is economically enlightened, and as a businessman, we are hoping that things will turn around. At least this is a renewed hope. So let's hope that things actually.
I have to say,
around.
I listened to the inaugural address, and from a business point of view, it was perfect. The markets reacted positively to it. I think the stock market in Nigeria had probably the most gains, for a very long time. Once the markets reacted to the speech. For people who want to bring FDIs, foreign direct investment, into the country, President Tinubu talked about creating opportunities for investors to be able to repatriate, money back to their home countries. And that's important, because there's no investor that will come into the country and they have their money stuck in Nigeria because of this dual exchange rate policy that we've got. So the fact that he talked about, harmonizing, the rates is a good thing, and it will encourage people to come into the country and invest.
And make investments.
Part of the breaking stories this morning by some of the dailies is that the borders have been ordered to be open. So yeah,
I'm not aware of that. I thought they were open previously. I thought they
No.
they were still shut.
It looks like it's breaking
the
news
previous
now.
administration left without opening the borders.
The borders, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, whatever it is that the present government needs to do to make Nigeria open for business, we need to do it. You know, Nigeria has the largest market, you know, in sub-Saharan Africa, and it's important that, you know, we open the market space to allow international players to come in, tap from human and natural resources, and when they come in, they'll pay taxes. You know, that's how you raise revenue. If you create an enabling environment, that's all government has to do.
Yeah.
Government has no business running business. Create policies or design policies that allows the private sector to thrive, and that would translate into, you know, into growth. President Tinubu talked about, you know, wanting to average 6% GDP. That's how you do it. You know,
it's just like what Otedola said the other day, that government has no business in running a business. Yours is to generate revenue, and the only way to do that is when you get, you know, the captains of industries, the players of industries, to take charge of those facilities and return back revenues.
Now, I still want to go back to the issue of the NLC making demands. Don't you think that at this point they should deal with one thing at a time? Let's deal with the issue of the fuel subsidy, then we look at other issues.
No,
having this meeting with all these demands.
No,
at the same time.
I think they are inter alia, in the sense that when you talk of subsidy removal, you are talking of add more money to me so that it will sustain me. So I think the minimum wage that came into the discussion was to complement the subsidy removal. Okay, we have agreed that the subsidy should go, but how can we sustain ourselves without the subsidy? Because, like I said, this thing shot to, I think, 300%. Okay?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
when you look at it, then you expect people to continue their life with the previous, or will I say with the existing minimum wage. It doesn't make economic sense.
So, Doctor, wrapping up, what would you say? You've made a whole lot of recommendations, and I really love that. So what would be your final recommendations to the NLC and the federal government?
Well, the talks will obviously continue, and whatever decisions the federal government reaches with the NLC will be purely hinged and based on revenue. You know, how does the government fund it? You know, the revenue mobilization and fiscal allocation commission that's responsible for divvying up the nation's revenue amongst the states and all and the rest of them will need to look at, you know, we'll need to look at this in terms of what number, you know, is finally agreed on. The economic outlook and viability of state governments to be able to afford to pay whatever new minimum wage is approved by the National Assembly. And I have to say at this point that patience is going to be required, because this needs to filter its way through the National Assembly, and as always, it moves at a slow pace.
That's right.
So I don't see a new minimum wage kicking in, you know, this side of 2023. So, but we just have to. But there are other things that the government can do in the short term to try and cushion the pain.
Yeah.
That sounds like bad news too.
But it's the truth.
Yeah.
Well, Prince,
like he said, it takes a long process.
Yeah.
Okay, to the first step is to even to sit down, start to deliberate on the issue, and see how can you even, you know, have this agreement, have come to this realization that okay, we can pay 50,000 minimum wage. NLC might not agree with that with 50,000. So it's something that they will keep. It's just like a court sitting, actually, because I could remember before we even arrive at 30,000 minimum wage, it took I think 2-3 years before. And I think up till now, there are states that have not agreed.
Implemented it, yeah.
Do you understand? There are states that have not implemented that. So you can now imagine that some states that have not implemented 30,000 naira minimum wage, how will even they will even shut their door completely.
And remember, it's not only an upward review of minimum wage. You need to look at pensioners as well. Pensioners. Right. So there's a huge ramification of doing any upward review of the minimum wage. So it is an expensive thing to do, but it is the right thing to do. But I do think that the government needs to, as quickly as it moved to make the announcement that there was no subsidy in the 2023 budget. But they should move as quickly as that to look at what can we do to support people through the process.
Thank you so much, Dr. Henry Dumbiri.
You're welcome.
He is a Scotland-based doctor, and he's also a solar expert. We're glad to have you. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to be here.
And of course, thank you so much, Uchenna Simon, a.k.a. Prince UC Ingawa.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching. Keep being a good Nigerian until we come your way again with another episode of the program. My name is Dell, and it has been the Patriot Podcast.